want to talk a little bit today about how to tell how advanced you are as a tarot reader. And a lot of people really want to have a gauge of where they're at. I know for me, when I started, it was just something I was doing and I kind of kept doing it. And I was sort of like, well, am I good or am I not good? Like, I didn't know where I was at. So I'm going to give you guys a list today of some different things that you can kind of check into. Some stuff might be really obvious. Some stuff might be things you haven't thought of. And this will kind of hopefully help you figure out like where you are in like the grand scheme of things, right? Like kind of what level you're at. So the very first thing I would say, and this one's quite obvious, is time, right? Not only in the amount of time that you have been, putting into everything, into your craft and to honing it and learning it and practicing it as well. That can be one area. And then the second area of that can be how much time you've actually put in professionally, right? Because that's another indicator too. You don't have to read professionally if you don't want to. That's fine. I know a lot of people just do it for themselves, self-introspective work, self-growth work. They do it with their friends. It's something fun that they do when they get together. But some people do read professionally. And I think that is another indicator that can be kind of slotted in under this area of time, right? The amount of time. Because if you are practicing and doing things, especially professionally over time, you should be learning a lot. You should be noticing that your skill set is getting better. You should have a little bit better gauge of where you are. It might not be so obvious, maybe 1, 2, 5 years in, you might still be kind of questioning things. I know when I first started, I just kind of was something that I did. I just read the cards and I gave the information and I wasn't sure if it was right or not. I kept doing it and people kept really liking my readings, but it was really difficult for me to tell where I kind of stood. So I think looking at that professionally too, when you're younger or newer to that, it can be a little bit more difficult. I think as you age and progress and grow as a tarot reader, you encounter all sorts of different interesting, unique situations, and you learn how to handle things. You learn interesting ways the cards are talking to you. So the more kind of interesting and unique and learning experiences that you have will tell you how advanced you are. And that is something that you can use on the spectrum there to help you decide where you're at. The next thing that we want to look at when we are trying to determine where we are is sort of feedback, right? And the feedback that we're getting from other people. It could be from clients, from your friends, from your family, whoever it is that you are reading cards for. The things that they are kind of telling you about what you're doing is a good indicator of where you are. Is somebody critiquing the way you're saying stuff to them? Are they expressing to you that, they're having a difficult time maybe with you holding space or, things like that. Feedback that you're getting, constructive criticism as well as positive comments, right? Like, that was a really great tarot reading. I like the way that you did this. And also too, an indicator is if people keep coming back, that is also a form of feedback, right? So if you're doing a bunch of readings and no one's coming back, you might want to take a look and assess that as well. But the feedback that you get from others is always a really good kind of benchmark to help you figure out where you're sitting. Now, the secondary part of the feedback comes from a little fun thing I like to call validation. And so this part is a little bit different from feedback, but it's under the same umbrella. So validation is when you do a reading, you tell somebody a bunch of things that you say in the cards, right? You do the reading and they come back to you and they say, oh, do you remember you said that thing about blah, 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 right? And they're very specific about what it is that you said. That totally happened. And then they tell you the story. If you are getting a lot of these situations or frequent situations that you are having people come back to you and give you notes like that and validation saying, hey, you said this and it was correct, right? So that's how you know how advanced you are too. If you're having a lot of people come back and they're not validating you and you're saying that, well, like this didn't really work or this didn't seem right or this happened this way, not that way, that's another indication of where you're at too. The connection that you have with the cards, how you're interpreting information, and those things kind of need to be addressed if you're finding you're getting not a lot of positive feedback in that sort of area. Another thing to consider with that too, with the validation is that sometimes people don't really connect the dots. So keep that in mind when you're getting validation as well, because you very may well have someone come to you, say, well, this happened, but you said this, and they're kind of not connecting it the right way. Sometimes that happens too. It's difficult sometimes for us to see clearly when we get information. So Keep that in mind too. That is another way that validation from other people and them sharing their stories with you on what kind of transpired and how accurate that was, that will also help you acknowledge kind of where you're at in the process. The next thing we want to look at is personal assessment, right? And this is where we have to be really honest with ourselves about how we're doing. And it's not always how we feel about what we're doing, because I think a lot of times we get self-conscious, we have imposter syndrome, we have anxiety. So all of these emotions, I don't think that's an indicator necessarily of the quality of tarot reading that you're doing. I think that's just normal human stuff that goes on. So I wouldn't say that personal assessment necessarily includes that, but I would say the personal assessment is more like, hey, how am I actually doing? Do I feel confident doing this? Am I struggling? Are there some cards in the deck I'm just really struggling with reading? Am I having trouble connecting pieces together? Really get into the nuts and bolts of how you're doing and be honest about it. I think sometimes it's very difficult for us to kind of acknowledge our shortcomings, or the places where we feel like we're failing, or the places that seem hard, or we're having roadblocks or speed bumps, because it makes us feel like we're doing a bad job, when the reality and truth of it is we're just learning. We're just honing our craft. We're just advancing, and those things we're having issues are showing us how we can be better. So I think if you can really sit back and give yourself some own feedback on that, that will tell you a lot about where you're at, right? Take the feelings out of it and kind of stick to the facts. And I think that will help you a little bit too if you're having a hard time getting in there and really accurately assessing things. Something else you can look at if you want to figure out kind of where you're at is, what are your offerings like, right? So some people will just give you a flat out tarot reading, like flat out. And when I started doing tarot readings, this is kind of where I was at. I would just kind of read the cards, give you the story, answer the questions, try to hold the space. That was it. As I have progressed and advanced, I am actually kind of helping people do some shadow work within my readings. I am giving people some, tools and techniques to kind of help them overcome certain situations. And then also too, like my intuitive abilities will give me information to pass along too. So it's not just whatever the card definitions are. I have all these other tools and things I'm pulling from. I'm pulling from numerology, I'm pulling from astrology. I'm doing all of these things to help give you this well-rounded, encompassing reading that's more than just flipping some cards. So if your offerings within your sessions are additional from just the cards, that is another place I think where you can assess how well you're doing, because not everyone does that, right? Everyone has kind of a different thing of what they offer. If you notice you're offering a lot of extra, bells and whistles, yeah, you're probably a little bit more advanced than you think you are. The last thing that I would suggest if you're looking for a gauge is to connect with your peers. And the reason I think this is important is not to measure yourself against them, but it kind of helps show you what's going on around you, what everyone else is doing, where everyone else is at. And sometimes you'll encounter people who are having the same problems as you are. Oh, I had this experience with this client or with my friend and I didn't know what to do. Oh my gosh, I had that same thing. Here's how I did it. So one, you're learning. Also two, you're realizing hey, I thought maybe I was down here, but I'm actually up here. There's people that I think are really good that are still having these experiences, right? So just kind of checking yourself against others makes you feel less alone. And it shows you how you are kind of fitting into the grand scheme of things within the world of tarot and the world of tarot readers. So I think that can be helpful too. The only thing like I mentioned before, just don't use it as a comparison. Oh, I should be doing this, or this person's doing that, or, use it as a place for a think tank ideas, use it as a place for sharing, and use it as a place where you can see where you fit into everything. Hey, I'm a lot like these type of readers. This is my style. Oh, I kind of do these things. These other people are doing that too. So, okay, you figure out where you're at and where you fit and where things flow for you. And I think that is really helpful as well. So we've gone over 7 different areas of places where you can check yourself to see how advanced you are today. And I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, until next time, thank you guys so much for watching and have an absolutely beautiful day.